Trigger mechanism. The grenade machine gun is set at safe and the bolt is in its forward position. The safety fire selector lever on the right side of the backplate can be set at safe, single fire and sustained fire. In the single fire or sustained fire modes, the bolt can be released by pressing the trigger levers on the left and the right side of the backplate. When the safety fire selector lever is set at safe and the bolt is retained by the sear in its rear position, the trigger mechanism is blocked by two independent mechanisms. A cam on the safety access pin blocks the rear extension of the sear control slide and thus prevents from any pivoting movement of the sear, which cannot release the bolt in this stage. Another cam on the safety access pin pushes the safety lock upwards into engagement with the trigger. This locks and blocks the trigger, which can then be no more actuated. The catch hook of the safety bolt lock serves as an additional safety. In case of breakage of the sear and the sear control slide, the catch hook retains the bolt. This also prevents from a release of the bolt by the trigger. For firing single shots, set the safety fire selector lever at single fire. The safety access pin pivots and unlocks the rear extension of the sear control slides. In addition to the unlocking of the sear and the sear control slide, a cam on the rotary safety access pin slides the safety lock of the trigger axis down, out of engagement of the trigger. Actuation of the triggers releases the bolt. When the triggers are depressed, the spring-loaded rocker latch pivots downward and pushes against the sear latch. This pivots the front of the sear and the sear control slide upward, which releases the bolt. The released bolt is pushed forward to its battery position by the recoil springs. When the bolt is released, the sear control slide is pushed to the rear by means of the compressed control slide spring. The rearward movement of the sear control slide pivots the sear latch. The pivoting sear latch disengages from the rocker latch. This releases the sear, which pivots downward at its front end. When the bolt recoils again, the sear engages and catches the bolt, even though the triggers are still depressed. The bolt, which is caught by the sear, pulls the sear control slide to the front, which pivots the sear latch back again to its original position. When the triggers are released, the spring-loaded rocker latch snaps off the sear latch back to its original position. After firing, set the safety fire selector lever at safe again. For firing bursts, set the safety fire selector lever at sustained fire. The safety access pin rotates and the locking cam of the safety access pin unlocks the rear extension of the sear control slide. In addition to the unlocking of the rear extension of the sear control slide, another cam on the safety access pin pushes the trigger axis safety lock downward, out of engagement of the trigger. Actuating the triggers releases the bolt. When the triggers are depressed in the sustained fire mode, the spring-loaded rocker latch pushes against the sear latch. This pivots the front of the sear and of the sear control slide to the top and releases the bolt, which moves forward, driven by the recoil springs. When the safety fire selector lever is set at sustained fire, a cam on the safety access pin pushes and holds the sear control slide to the front. This prevents the sear latch from pivoting and snapping off the rocker latch when the trigger is depressed and the bolt is released. The rearward traveling bolt is only caught by the sear when the triggers are released and the sear pivots downward at its front. When firing is finished, set the GMG at safe again. Bolt operation. When the triggers are depressed, the pivoting sear releases the bolt, which is driven forward by the recoil springs. The forward-moving bolt moves the first linked cartridge via the feed mechanism into alignment with the chamber, where the cartridge is delinked and fed by the bolt. During the final stage of the cartridge chambering operation, a cam on the control lever guide rail in the receiver is hit by the control lever. This stroke pivots the control lever, which moves the firing pin sleeve to the front. Shortly after the forward movement of the firing pin sleeve, the spring-loaded cocking lever is released and moves upward with its roller. Finally, the catch lever hits a protruding cam on the firing pin catch lever guide rail and is released from the firing pin. The firing pin spring pushes the firing pin forward, which ignites the almost fully chambered cartridge. The cartridge is ignited and detonated during the forward movement of the bolt, in the final phase of the chambering operation. After the chambered cartridge has been ignited and detonated, the bolt starts its rearward travel and extracts the cartridge case. During the rearward travel of the bolt, the cocking lever with its roller hits a cam on the guide rail and cocks the firing pin, which is arrested by the firing pin catch lever. The control lever moves the firing pin sleeve to the rear. The cartridge case is ejected to the right when the bolt further travels to the rear. In the final phase of its rearward travel, the bolt with its buffer hits the backplate. In its rearmost position, the bolt is caught and retained by the sear. Feed mechanism. In the original position shown, the bolt is in its forward position and the GMG is set at safe. A safety inspection must be carried out on the GMG. That means the barrel bore must be clear and the bolt must be uncocked. Loading is carried out in the following sequences. Cock the bolt by means of the cocking handle. Push the feed cover locking levers to the center and open the feed cover. Slide the linked cartridges onto the feed throat. Mind that the first round is firmly retained by the retaining pole. Also mind that the linked rounds are fed with the male link first. The center of the first linked cartridge is now displaced for approximately half of its width from the center line of the barrel. Close the feed cover and pull on the belt link to ensure that the first round is correctly retained by the retaining pole. The GMG is now ready to fire. Unset the safety and pull the trigger. The bolt is released and is driven forward by the recoil springs. The forward traveling bolt moves the feed drive lever, the drive transmission lever, feed lever 1, feed lever 2, feed slide 1 and feed slide 2. The feed poles of feed slide 2 transport the first linked cartridge for half of its width into alignment with the center line of the barrel. In the final phase of the bolt forward travel, the bolt grips the first linked round, unlinks and feeds it directly into the chamber where the round is ignited. The rearward moving bolt extracts the case, which is subsequently ejected to the right side by the pivoting ejector lever. During the rearward movement of the bolt, the feed elements are once more actuated, whereby the feed poles of feed slide 1 transport the first linked round for half of its width towards the center line of the barrel. When the bolt has traveled all the way to the rear, it is automatically caught and arrested by the sear when the safety fire selector lever is at single fire. Sight adjustment. For coarse, respectively pre-adjustment of the reflex sight, mount the GMG in a horizontal manner on the tripod, which is in its low L position. Attach the T&E mechanism with a crossbar to the rear tripod legs and mount the reflex sight onto the side bracket. Push the feed cover locking levers to the center and open the feed cover. Remove flash hider, cartridge stop and bolt from the GMG. Insert the aperture bore sight into the chamber. Insert the crosshair bore sight into the muzzle. Place the sight adjustment target in a vertical position at 10 meters distance from the muzzle. Aim through the receiver barrel via the bore sights at the adjustment target and position the GMG in a way that the bore sights point at the small cross on the adjustment target. Firmly lock the GMG in this position by means of the T&E mechanism and close the feed cover. For height adjustment of the reflex sight, loosen the friction screw at the front of the reflex sight. Turn the height adjustment screw at the front of the reflex sight and adjust the adjustment cross on the reflex sight reticle in a way that it coincides in height with the large adjustment cross on the target. Tighten the friction screw. For lateral adjustment, loosen both friction screws at the rear of the reflex sight. Turn the sight adjustment screw at the rear of the reflex sight and adjust the adjustment cross on the reflex sight reticle in a way that it coincides with the large adjustment cross on the target. Tighten the friction screws. Remount flash hider, cartridge stop and bolt. The GMG is now pre-adjusted. Carry out an adjustment firing at 200 meters and finally adjust the GMG. The mechanical sight is adjusted at the 200 meters range mark of the reflex sight after the final adjustment of the reflex sight. Assembly groups. Accessories.